Hey, it's Jonathan. The question is, what kind of insurance do I need? Basically, here's a list of the things you might consider. So, a general liability policy, generally going to be required for most commercial projects. It's a big selling point for residential, or at least we definitely promote it. Then, workers' comp. In most states, workers' comp policies are required to get most big commercial projects or most commercial in general. They need the legal risk shifted from them back to you, and you accomplish that with a workers' comp policy. Again, in most states that's required when your payroll exceeds some certain amount of money. It's usually in the low tens of thousands of dollars, and once you achieve that, you've got to have workers' comp. That's not true in all states, though. Another type of insurance that you might consider is when you're setting up your general liability policy, or when you're setting up the insurance to cover your vehicles and trailers. That's when you're going to look into insurance for your trucks. If you're making custom beds, or uh, you've got tanks for spraying, anything that could be stolen that would be very painful to you if you lost it. When you're talking about general liability policies and your auto policies and such, that agent's a good one to talk to about your protecting basically your assets of the business. The other policies that you might consider is, as you grow your company, you're going to have some key people in your company. So you might look at what's called a key man policy. It's a life insurance policy. So a key man policy basically, so let's use this example. There's two partners in the business. Here's different ways to use it. You could have a key man policy on both of the partners. In the event that one of the partners dies, the proceeds from that life insurance policy would be used to buy out the other partner's spouse. So let's say you had a business worth $1 million, and you each had a life insurance policy for $500,000, a key man life insurance policy. If you passed away, then your business partner could take the $500,000 in benefits from your life insurance policy, pay your spouse off, and essentially take over full ownership of the company. Those kind of policies, you need to continually adjust them as the valuation of your company increases, so that you'd have enough money to buy out your spouse, or buy out your partner's spouse. That's one way to use them. Another way to use a key man life insurance policy is simply, if there's two or three very important people in the company, if one of those individuals is lost, it's going to really hurt the business. And so one way to help cover yourself is to insure that person with a key man life insurance policy, so that if they're lost, you're paid, so that if you have to go out immediately and overpay to hire somebody else to replace them, or whatever you have to do to keep the business stable and secure, then that life insurance policy and the money that comes from it would help you cover that business. So the key man policy can be used for two things: buying out a spouse, and number two, providing money to get you through a really tough period when a key person in the business has been lost. Outside of that, you're looking at things like health insurance related policies. And in the health insurance world, you've got health insurance. You would be looking at what would probably be called a small group policy, 50 employees or less. If you've got more than 50 employees that are going to be insured, then you're going to be looking at a larger group policy. It works completely different, and by state all of this varies. But you would be dealing with what would be called a small group policy, as long as there's two people participating in the insurance policy, or less than 50, that's generally a small group policy. There's things you could do, such as get your own policy by talking with basically an insurance health agent, or you can join things like AdministStaff that will manage your HR and payroll and also help with insurance. So that's another possibility for insurance. Then there's just general life insurance. And so pretty much anything that you're concerned with, you can find insurance to protect you against it. But generally in the lawn care industry, starting out, the core first policy that I generally see people get is that general liability policy, or if you're in a work comp state, which most people are, then you're looking at a workers' comp policy pretty early on in the business. The other things, the health insurance, the key man policies, the insuring the equipment, which is wise, those things generally happen a little later. And of course, from day one, you've got to insure your automobiles. So those are the key types of insurance that you're generally going to be looking at. And when you look for insurance, there's different ratings of risk. The lawn care industry is rated as a higher risk industry. Hedge trimmers are a huge injury prone piece of equipment, and so depending on what you do is going to reflect what your rates are going to be, whether you're dealing with chemicals or not dealing with chemicals. So be mindful as you go into this. what offerings you offer. So here's a great example. Let's say you're a residential company and you've never needed a certain type of insurance, but you'll now need it when you get this first commercial property. Well, I wouldn't even take that first commercial policy or property unless you plan to grow that area, if it means you have to get an insurance policy to cover your entire company for some type of insurance you never needed until you got that one property. Other examples of that would be if you're just going to dabble in spraying lawns, fertilization, weed control, that can affect your insurance rates versus if you just stay in mowing. So when you think about insurance, sometimes that will drive whether or not you should even enter another market. So if you ignore the insurance issue, then generally moving into spraying when you're a mow company, no big deal. But if you're going to only get 4 or 5 or 8 yards, and now your insurance rates are going to increase because of the liability of the chemicals, that's something to consider. So these are all things to take into account when you're thinking about buying insurance, what kind of insurance you get, and so on. Thanks a lot.